You're listening to Inside Public Procurement by Bonfire, a show celebrating the unique stories and heroic efforts of those on the front lines of public procurement. Each episode, we bring you the latest trends, tips, and real stories from procurement trailblazers like you, who work tirelessly to bring positive impact to the agencies and communities you serve. Together, let's elevate the field of public procurement to new heights. Now, pull up a chair and let's gather around the bonfire. Our show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to the Inside Public Procurement Podcast. My name is Tung La and I am a client support agent as well as the podcast producer at Bonfire, an e-procurement solution used by over 500 public agencies in North America. I'm very, very excited today because not only are we doing our first in-person podcast, but I'm also doing it with just an amazing human being who also happens to work at Bonfire. I'm talking about Emily Lambert, everyone. Hello.
Wow, thanks, Tung. That's quite the introduction. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Emily. So people don't know who you are, but you're very, very important to the podcast. Do you want to give a little intro about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So like Tung said, I work over on the Bonfire team. So I think this is our first time, having a Bonfire team member on the podcast.
We've never done it before, but you've been itching to be on the podcast. Even though you run things behind the scenes, you're like, Tung, I need to get in right now.
Yeah, that doesn't really sound a whole lot like me. I think I came in kicking and screaming a little bit, but no, in all seriousness, I am the manager of content marketing at Bonfire. So basically what that means is really any content that we are putting out to procurement professionals, whether that's, this podcast, whether it's our awesome Bonfire blog, whether it's some of the reports and ebooks that we're putting out. Chances are that if I wasn't the one who created it came across my desk at one point. So if you ever go to bonfire.com, chances are a lot of what you see on there came from me. So
you're a little bit of a celebrity is what you're saying.
I'd say I'm a bit more of a behind the scenes celebrity, if that's a thing.
Is that a thing?
I don't know. I think that's the opposite of what a celebrity is.
Well, it's a thing starting now. That's exciting, Emily. Before we get into the meat of the episode, because we do have a purpose of bringing on a Bonfire guest today, because of course we usually interview procurement professionals outside of Bonfire to talk on this podcast, but today's a very special episode, as you can tell already. But before we get into that, Emily, we ask this on every single podcast, and I'd be remiss not to ask you. So tell me a little bit about your journey on how you got into procurement.
I mean, it's definitely a different journey than anyone else who has been on the podcast, because unlike all of our other guests, I'm actually not in public procurement, but I am creating thought leadership and content for public procurement professionals. So when I joined Bonfire, a big goal of mine was to create really insightful content that's valuable for procurement professionals, that provides thought leadership, that really speaks to a lot of the hot topics and just those themes that are really on procurement people's minds. And I think also it's really important to note that I think a lot of procurement thought leadership out there can be a little bit dry, a little bit boring. I think there's an assumption that that's what procurement people want. But I think that there's actually a lot of opportunity to have a lot of fun, because honestly, procurement people are amazing.
They are.
They are responsible for so much of making our world go round. Even just thinking, like, every winter now, I can't see, salt going out on the streets without thinking about the procurement process that went behind that, right? So why not have a little bit of fun with the content that goes out to procurement professionals? So that's really the ultimate goal behind a lot of the content that goes out through Bonfire, that we're providing thought leadership, we're providing insight, we're trying to create a community of peers and having a lot of fun along the way.
That actually goes really well into the theme that we're really highlighting over these last few months, which is procurement professionals are superheroes in their organization. And does that mean you're a superhero, Emily?
You said it, not me, Tung.
Okay,
so I
okay.
think
Well, we
right.
usually start with a little icebreaker question. I'm not sure if you and I need one, but let's do it anyways. Emily, on the theme of superheroes and superpowers, I think I've asked this on another episode already, but I'm curious what powers you wanted. And with the spin of, because I know you're a big Disney fan, which Disney superpower do you want?
Oh, this is interesting,
Yep.
Actually. I feel like this is a good twist on it. Honestly, I would love to have Rapunzel's magic hair.
This is not at all surprising.
Are you surprised at all? So not only can she like swing and climb things on it, which is pretty awesome, but she can heal with it too, which I think would come in handy. I have a huge aversion to blood or gore or anything. If I get a paper cut, like I have to get my husband to put a Band-Aid on for me because it just grosses me out. So I feel like being able to just like heal it right away, not have to worry about it would be awesome.
Well, you do have to sing when you heal yourself.
That's true, and I cannot sing to save my life. Okay. So yeah, that's the one thing. I have to learn to sing to be able to do that.
Okay. Well, we'll ponder that some more because you've given me a lot to think about. But of course, we have other things to talk about today, Emily. We're here to talk about the state of public sourcing. Now, the acronym was SOPS, which I thought that was a cleaning product when you first brought it up to me, but it clearly isn't. Can you tell me a little bit about what it is and why the Bonfire team creates it every year?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I try to avoid calling it SOPS in person. That's more of like when you're writing it out. It's a lot faster to do. But yeah, so we create the State of Public Sourcing report every single year. This is actually our 5th year creating it. And essentially what it does is it takes data from the Bonfire database to kind of speak to the state of procurement today, how that data kind of relates to current events or things that procurement professionals are experiencing, and how we're seeing that reflected in the Bonfire database. And then we usually augment that with some awesome just stories from the field where we interview procurement professionals to kind of get their insights on kind of what's going on in procurement today. And then usually there's some survey data in there as well. So it's kind of a variety of a bunch of different things where we kind of bring it all together just to be able to create sort of this one-stop shop for procurement professionals to understand how their peers are approaching the challenges and priorities of today and what they can kind of learn from their peers through that so that they can actually step into, procurement today with more strength than ever. And that's a big reason why we kind of went with this kind of superhero theme this year, is that we truly believe that procurement professionals are the superheroes of their agencies. And we really, really saw that in this year's report. And I'll go into more detail as we dig into it. But I think it's just really important to note that we were just kind of blown away by just the resiliency of procurement professionals, how they're adjusting to things like increased infrastructure funding, the Great Resignation, all these different factors kind of coming together, and procurement is just tackling them in stride, which is really awesome to see.
This is why we have Emily on the podcast here today, folks, because look at this knowledge that she is just spewing at us, and I can't wait to just dig into it and get into the SOPs. Okay, I'm going to stop calling it that now.
Yeah, right now, so we're stopping it right now. No more
State of
SOPs.
Public Sourcing report. What were some key findings from this year's report?
So we had a lot. So this report is over 30 pages. So when you dig into it, you'll see that there were a lot of awesome key findings. I'd say it really boils down to kind of 4 major themes or key findings that we had. So the first one was project volume. So we found that Bonfire users are running 28% more projects than they did last year. And transit and utilities agencies specifically are running more projects than ever. We saw a 33% increase in transportation and 13% increase in utilities. So number one, we're seeing a huge increase in project volume. Number two, we're also seeing an increase in supplier diversity and how agencies are approaching supplier diversity. And we found that across all agencies or all different industries, there was an increase in fields in the Bonfire product related to DBE or disadvantaged business enterprises. But top of the list for industries embracing vendor diversity are transportation. So 33% of transportation agencies have some sort of DBE field in the Bonfire product, 20% of higher education agencies, and 11% of K-12. So we're really seeing them lead the charge. So supplier diversity is number 2. Number 3 is e-procurement use is on the rise. So we saw a 7% increase in logins to the Bonfire platform. And I'll go into this in a bit more as well, but really seeing how e-procurement use really correlates with this kind of rise in project volume. And then fourth, just that community impact. So again, this just relates back to this superhero theme that we kind of acknowledged earlier, is that procurement professionals are the superheroes of their organizations because they're making a huge impact on the communities that they serve. We saw that manifests in the form of cost savings. So agencies are saving up to $269,000 or 9.5% per RFP with e-procurement, which is huge. We understand that when there's cost savings, it means you're stewarding taxpayer dollars well, and that's impacting your communities positively. And then we're also seeing an environmental impact as well. Since Bonfire launched in 2012, agencies have saved over 157 million sheets of paper, which is huge.
Wow.
So we're seeing a big environmental impact there as well. So just to sum it up, the 4 key findings were project volume, supplier diversity, e-procurement, and community impact.
That's a lot of sheets of paper.
It really is.
So many books.
Do you know how many trees that adds up to?
No, I don't. Is there a certain amount of sheets per tree? Is that a metric?
Yeah, so we ran the numbers, and that adds up to about 15,000 trees that are saved.
What?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, that is really, really cool. I'm curious because you're saying that everything's on the up and up. More projects, supplier diversity, more use in e-procurement, lots of stuff are on the up and up. So why is that the case? Why are we seeing an increase in project volume and things like that?
Yeah, I think that there's a variety of factors, and we really explore this in the report as well. And I think there were 2 major factors that are contributing to this phenomenon. I think number 1 is this increase in infrastructure-related funding. In the US, we're seeing ARPA and IIJA funding, which are really focusing on infrastructure. And in Canada, we're seeing the Canada Infrastructure Program. So a lot of investment going into infrastructure, and that means that procurement teams are feeling the pressure to be investing in those projects. So we even see that when we looked at the numbers when it came to construction and software related projects. We saw a 56% increase in construction projects and a 36% increase in software related projects. So we're really seeing that kind of manifest there. And I think the other constraint or factor in this kind of phenomenon is, I know we've all heard about the Great Resignation, and I think a lot of procurement teams are facing a lot of headcount issues, a lot of budget issues, a lot of constraints there. So we're seeing this kind of balance of procurement professionals experiencing a higher project volume while also experiencing less procurement resources, whether that's in the form of less people working in procurement or less budget, or all these kind of different constraints there. So there's kind of this tension going on that we're seeing. And as we kind of explore in the report, how are procurement professionals really navigating these new challenges of a higher project volume and just really feeling the strain and the tension of just not having the resources that they need. So we kind of go into that a little bit more in the report as well.
Very interesting. I want you to just expand a little bit on the Great Resignation piece a little bit, because I feel like some new procurement professionals listening in on this podcast might not know exactly what the state of procurement is like right now, and it does seem like it's quite a big thing happening. So do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, for sure. So the Great Resignation is really impacting not just the private sector, but the public sector as well. I think a lot of the conversations are happening around it in the private sector, but it is really impacting the public sector. We're seeing record numbers of public sector employees leaving the public sector and not just transferring to another agency, but they're transferring to the private sector, or they're retiring because of the generation that's primarily working in procurement right now. So we're seeing kind of this record numbers of people changing jobs, record number of people leaving the public sector, and that's really impacting, all departments in the public sector, including procurement. So it typically manifests in looking like less headcount, or maybe more time spent hiring, looking for people to fill open roles. We know across the US and Canada right now, there's just a record number of open roles, both in the private sector and public sector. So it's not just impacting procurement, it's impacting, the entire workforce, but we're seeing the ways that that's manifesting in the public sector and in public procurement right now as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Emily. I'm going to go back to this idea that there is such a big increase in project volume, like you just mentioned. How are teams actually keeping up with that increase while still maintaining competition / signing best value contracts?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's what a lot of the rest of our State of Public Sourcing report really dives into, is that question of like, okay, there's more projects on the go. We have all this money that we need to invest in our infrastructure. and we have, maybe less headcount or less resources than we did, pre-pandemic. How are we approaching this? So we kind of found that there were maybe 3 different strategies that a lot of procurement professionals are kind of utilizing or approaching in order to kind of meet this new demand. So first of all, we found that vendor invites have gone up. So procurement professionals are really tapping into their vendor database in order to get projects out there, to get more vendors submitting RFPs so that there is, greater competition, there is greater cost savings and all that kind of stuff. So we actually saw that agencies sent out 112% more vendor invites than they did in 2021. And that was just really in an effort to kind of get projects in front of as many people as possible to really up the ante when it comes to vendor submissions.
That's a really big increase in 1 year.
Yeah, and what we saw in last year's report, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I think there was even a greater increase between 2021 and 2020. So year over year, we're seeing agencies really tap into their vendor database and send out more invites. Whether or not, is quantity over quality maybe the best approach? We talk about that a bit in the report as well. There's some interesting findings on what's the best number of vendor invites to send out to your database. And we kind of did a bit of a deep dive into that in the report. So you definitely want to check that out. And then on the topic of vendors, it wasn't just an increase in vendor outreach, but we also saw an increase in vendor diversity, like I mentioned earlier. So Bonfire clients have created 26% more DBE fields. Again, that's disadvantaged business enterprise. So fields in the platform. So they're tracking the number of DBEs that are applying and submitting RFPs. So Bonfire clients saw 26% more DBE fields in the projects than they did in 2021. And like I said, transit, higher ed, and K-12 are especially tapping into vendor diversity in order to increase competition, get RFPs maybe in front of people that wouldn't necessarily have seen them or have had the resources to apply, and really encouraging them to submit those RFPs.
That's really cool because we've talked to a lot of procurement professionals on this podcast specifically about vendor diversity and how important it is continuing to become within their organization, and to see these numbers increase by 26%. That's a really incredible thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of agencies are understanding that vendor diversity, it's more than just the right thing to do, which it is. It's also an important business strategy to make sure that you're not just getting one vendor submission from a big company, but you're actually getting some of the little guys in there as well to be able to up competition and just be able to impact your community, frankly, by investing in vendor diversity. And then the third kind of factor or maybe method that procurement professionals are embracing in order to maintain competition, sign best value contracts amidst all of these factors going on is the use of technology. So we saw Bonfire use go up by 7% last year, or this past year. So we're seeing, technology use is going up. Interestingly, we're also seeing the number of project owners per organization go down. So that went down by 1.2%. So the people that are owning projects in the Bonfire platform has gone down. And that might be because, like we mentioned earlier, procurement resources might be decreased. There might be less procurement professionals in the organization, less people to actually own those projects. But at the same time, we're seeing the users per project, so not just the project owner, the people who are in the project, evaluating and looking at the RFP submissions and all that stuff, has actually gone up by 3.8%. And that's probably likely due to the fact that as more infrastructure projects are increasing, those are more complex projects. They usually require more people involved. And so that's likely the reason why we're seeing users per project actually increase.
Very interesting. So on this idea of procurement heroes, now they don't get magic hair. I don't think anyone has magic hair in the industry. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure if this is in the report, Emily, but I would consider their power technology. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree. I think even in the report, we actually had the CEO of Bonfire, Omar. He wrote a bit of a foreword to introduce the report, and even introduced not just technology, but There's really 5 key superpowers that kind of arose both from the State of Public Sourcing report. We also recently ran our first ever Bonfire Procurement Awards. So that allowed Bonfire clients to submit nominations either for themselves or their teams, really highlighting just how they're impacting their agency and their communities through technology. And we saw 5 key procurement superpowers kind of come out of that. So technology, yes, is definitely a big one. And like we mentioned earlier, vendor diversity is also a big one. That's a big superpower that procurement professionals are going to take into the rest of 2022 to really be able to make an impact on their agency. And then the other ones we've discovered were collaboration, client service, and cost savings. And the report really dives into all of these, but specifically cost savings, which I'm actually going to talk about a little bit in a bit.
I love this. And you know how much I love superhero talk and superpower talk, Emily. You hear that Batman and Superman, no more laser eyes or frost breath or flying. We got real powers right here, real world powers.
That's right. That's right.
Emily, on the topic of technology and that superpower, how exactly are procurement teams using this technology to handle all these projects that are coming in while also experiencing this, great resignation, headcount issues that you've been talking about?
Yeah, so we discovered that the main purpose of technology in public procurement teams is really to foster internal collaboration. These previous points we looked at, vendor diversity, vendor engagement, are really looking how are we engaging those outside of our agency. Technology really comes together to say, okay, how are we engaging those within our agency? How are we engaging not just, those within public procurement and that's their day jobs, how are we engaging those users outside of procurement that are the ones making the requests, that are the ones that have day jobs to get back to. They don't have a whole lot of time to dedicate to an evaluation or looking over RFP submissions. So technology really is kind of the key there. So we found that there are 2 main product features or, pieces of technology that procurement teams use in order to really foster that internal collaboration. So the first is a request intake form. So this is a formalized intake process where external users can submit their requests, and then that goes right to procurement. A lot of the times this can look like the form of emails or just, sometimes it's just a conversation at the water cooler, right? There's a lot of informal ways that people make these requests. We find that technology is really key to formalizing this process and really streamlining it. The RFP creation process can be really crazy. There's a lot involved. You're doing a lot of research. You're getting requirements from people. You're calling up maybe your neighbor to see if they've run a similar RFP. So having a formalized intake form is really beneficial to streamlining that process. And then we found that the most common category of projects that utilize a formal project intake form is professional services, actually. This was a bit surprising. I thought it was going to be construction, as we saw that kind of big increase in construction-related projects. That's only actually number 2. Professional services is the most popular kind of category of projects that we see request intake forms come from. And then on average, it takes about 14 days for a request to launch into a project. So like I said, that's the time where you're gathering those requirements, you're doing that research, you're building the RFP and getting it ready to hit the streets. And then secondly, we also looked at how technology can help benefit approvals and streamline that process. And so within Bonfire, there is an approval workflow feature. And in that feature, we saw that 77% of approval requests are on time, which is actually pretty good. I mean, it's always room for improvement at 77%, but we're seeing that the majority of approval requests are on time.
That's a B+ in high school.
There you go.
That is exactly all I aimed for back in high school.
And you know what? That's getting RFPs to the streets faster. So that's what more do you need, right? What more do you want? We saw the average time that it took for a final response to come in was 1.5 days, which is actually also really quick. So approval workflows really, when you leverage technology, really streamline that process, because a lot of the time when you're asking for an approval, if you're sending an email or an internal memo or whatever that looks like, you could be waiting days or even weeks for that approval to come in. So the fact that with technology, the average is 1.5 days is really incredible. And then approval workflows also see a 78% response rate, which is awesome. So Approval workflows, intake are kind of the two kind of main technology features that we discovered that are really kind of aiding in this quest to really tackle this high project volume while also experiencing these, kind of headcount issues.
Right. And with those headcount issues and trying to handle these projects, of course, you need to find a way to streamline things. Flashback to 10 years ago, 15 years ago, even only a few years ago, and some organizations still do this, which is just got paper bids, you got just coordinating through email and just going through your email inbox, trying to figure out whatever system you can to try to get all of this out the door. But having this all in one place really, I think, streamlines things and elevates your ability to run a proper RFP. Is that right?
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, intake and approvals are only pieces of the puzzle, right? It's if you're doing all that through technology, but you're still evaluating bids through spreadsheets, you're kind of missing the point a little bit as far as being able to centralize all the information in one place and really be able to invite stakeholders and collaborators into that place instead of, okay, I have to send you an email here, a spreadsheet here, make sure that we're not opening, if we're doing vendor submissions through email, we have to make sure we're not opening an email too early because that could jeopardize the project and all these different things that you have to think about when you're kind of using this patchwork of tools, right? So centralizing everything in technology is overall the key thing here. And then being able to look at minute things like intake, like approval workflows, and being able to bring that into that centralized e-procurement technology as well is so, so crucial.
Yes, definitely. It's the thing that allows you to do more, right? More with your time. So how does all of this, supplier diversity, supplier engagement, e-procurement technology, how does that all come together? What is the results for the agencies?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it means, impacting the communities and the constituents you serve. Again, coming back to this idea of why procurement teams are truly, the superheroes of their agencies is they are saving costs. And that's huge because they are the stewards of taxpayer dollars. So that means that when they save costs, they're saving taxpayer dollars that can go to other initiatives, being able to maximize those dollars to be able to make an even bigger impact on the community. So, we're seeing that agencies that use e-procurement technology actually do see a 9.5% savings on their RFPs, and that could add up to about $269,000 per project, which is no small thing.
No, I could use $269,000.
And other maybe social programs or other things within a public agency can use those dollars, right? So it's huge when agencies are able to save that money. We're actually seeing the industry that is seeing the biggest impact of cost savings through technology is healthcare. Healthcare organizations actually see an average of 14% cost savings per project using procurement technology. So again, if you're purchasing, a big MRI machine, like all these different things that healthcare organizations are purchasing, that could add up to some really significant cost savings that can really impact your community.
That's a really good one to point out too. Like I do joke about needing $269,000. I mean, I kind of joke. I would love it. But the idea that money can go towards hospital equipment, saving lives, like it really does feel like procurement is saving lives.
Yeah, I don't think that's an exaggeration.
Yeah.
I think when you look at it like that, procurement is really making a big impact, across healthcare, you think about K-12 and higher education schools, how procurement is able to purchase, textbooks and things that directly lead to students learning and all these different things. So whether, if you don't work in procurement, we don't always think about how procurement is impacting our lives. But really at the end of the day, every single one of us have been impacted by procurement in some way or another.
Oh, absolutely.
So not just within different industries, we've also seen cost savings across different categories of projects. And really surprisingly, we saw the commodity code that sees the biggest impact of cost savings is printing and audiovisual equipment. So if you're doing any sort of printing projects, any sort of audiovisual equipment projects, you could see a total of about 27.4% savings in in those projects. So again, that really adds up over time. We also saw that vendor engagement is a critical driver of project cost savings. So we've talked about vendor engagement, why it's important to engage your vendors, bring vendors into the process, send them invites directly. So when you do that, when you're engaging vendors and you're really bringing them into the process, we saw that if you have 4 or more vendor submissions, you are likely to see a 2x savings per project. So you're likely to see double the savings if you have 4 vendors submitting an RFP versus 1, which makes sense, right? When you have more competition, you're more likely to see those cost savings, and that leads to a direct impact on your community. And then besides cost savings, we also saw that environmental impact that we talked about earlier. So over 157 million pages of paper saved. Like we said, that's the equivalent to about 15,000 trees. And that's not even like factoring in the carbon emissions that you're saving from printing and shipping vendor submissions, which is, still a very common practice and, is not the greatest for the environment too. So technology kind of helps eliminate that with online vendor submissions.
Very cool. That's very, very cool. Emily, you've given us so much information today, so much really, really great stuff and statistics and all of that. Now, I would love if you read the entire report front to back, like an Audible book, or I was just listening to a thing where Tom Hiddleston read Winnie the Pooh from front to back. Now, I don't think you have time to do that.
I feel like Winnie the Pooh might be a little bit shorter than our State of Public Sourcing report.
You think so?
Maybe a little bit.
Okay, well, you're not going to read all of it, of course. How do people actually view this report?
Yeah, of course. So I'm the one who writes and looks over the descriptions of the podcast episodes before they go out. So I'll make sure that there's a link there. But you can also go to gobonfire.com/super-sourcing. And I'll make sure that there's a link in the description as well for you to go to. And you can download the report there. We'll also be present for anyone going to NIGP Forum in Boston from August 20th to 22nd, I believe. You can visit our booth. So our booth will be exhibiting during the exhibition hours on August 21st and 22nd. Will be booth 918, and you can drop by and say hi and be able to pick up, well, I guess not a physical version of the ebook, but you'll get a QR code for a digital version because we're sticking to our word, being environmentally friendly, so you can...
It would be pretty backwards if we just printed 157,000
yeah, just like completely just negated all of that work that we've done. You'll be able to come by, scan a QR code, and download the report digitally. And then if you have any questions about the report too, we'll have the Bonfire team present, and they'll be more than happy to answer your questions and talk more about how you can leverage procurement technology in your own organization.
Yes, that's amazing. Please check it out. There is, as you can already tell, there's a lot of really key information inside this report. I will be there too, so you can come say hi. Emily, you're not going to be there, I hear.
No, sadly. I'll be there in spirit.
That's okay. I'll be, as long as I'm there.
Yes, exactly.
No, I can never fill the void that is left by Emily when she's not. You're welcome. Emily, this is so great. Before we close out the show, of course, we can't finish the episode without asking this very important question. Do you have a number one piece of advice that you give to public procurement professionals starting out their career?
I mean, again, it's a little bit different coming from me, but I think first of all, download the State of Public Sourcing report. Very important. But on a more serious note, too, I think there's a lot of importance on learning from your peers and building that community. And the State of Public Sourcing is one way that we do that. This podcast is another way in which we do that. Procurement teams can be small. Maybe you're even a one-person procurement team. It can be hard to build relationships and to learn from people that are in the same field as you. So it's so important to, go to those conferences, listen to those podcasts, meet with those colleagues, and just be able to learn from your peers, because what I've learned from working in procurement for the last almost 3 years is that procurement professionals love to share their learnings. They understand that, a rising tide lifts all boats, and they want to be able to share their own experience and help other procurement professionals just thrive in their roles and be able to impact their agencies. So yeah, just continue to build that community would be my advice.
Yeah, that's really fantastic stuff. And I think, if anything else, this report shows and reframes this idea, and Emily, you talked about this at the beginning, where people either don't know what procurement is or think it's a boring profession. But as you can see, there's a lot of stuff happening in the field of procurement that has real life impact in the world. And it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool thing. Again, saving lives.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, my question to you, Emily, does this report on the theme of like superheroes and stuff, did you get comic book drawings of all of us in this report? Who am I in this report?
Tongue, I'll let you choose because there are some fun illustrations in this report. It's definitely very superhero themed.
Great.
And maybe there's going to be a character in there that really speaks to you, and you can say that that's you, and it will be
disagree.
truth. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Spider-Man. That's phenomenal. Emily, if people want to get in touch with you specifically, is there a way for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to engage with me there. Emily Lambert. You can also email me at elambert@gobonfire.com. I'd be happy to chat more.
Fantastic. Well, that's been another episode of Inside Public Procurement. I hope you enjoyed today's very special episode with our very special guest, Emily. Emily, will you be coming back on the podcast anytime soon?
Maybe for next year's State of Public Sourcing Report. We shall see.
Okay, sounds good. Well, in the meantime, we are going to work on Emily singing to help her
Good luck with
get
that.
some powers.
Oh, wow.
And we'll see you on another episode of Inside Public Procurement next time. Take care, everyone.
Procurement professionals like you are the lifeblood of public sector organizations, dedicated not only to supporting your agency, but the constituents you serve. That's why we've created the Inside Public Procurement podcast here at Bonfire, a unique place where you can share stories and discuss the topics that matter to public procurement pros. From digitization and the future of public procurement to ensuring a fair and transparent process, we're all about finding new strategies to help your agency succeed. Join us at gobonfire.com to learn more. You've been listening to Inside Public Procurement by Bonfire. If you like what you've heard, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you have an idea for an episode or want to come on as a guest, email us at hello@gobonfire.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.